All right, so we are live. Welcome in, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Let me center myself because I have a team of people that watch and tell me, Loretta, you weren't centered because I got up and moved after they centered me. But anyway, I'm so excited about this show. And yes, I say that about every show, but I'm really excited about this show because my guest today has been on my blog talk show many times. I have about 3 or 4 of his books, and I have this newest book, and we're going to talk about that today. And I think it's so apropos that we are talking to, he's a legend. He is truly a legend, Pat Williams, and revolutionary leadership. You guys are going to love this book. I'm going to tell you about that. But first, I want to tell you about my friend who's on with me. He's retired now, but he is co-founder and senior VP of Orlando Magic. And as you know, one of my sons was a diehard Orlando Magic fan. He's not with us right now, but he loved Orlando Magic. And then, I'm in Memphis, Pat, and Penny Hardaway is here as well, coaching. So everybody, welcome to Loretta McNary's show. No stranger to anyone, Mr. Pat Williams. Hi there, Pat.
Loretta, it's wonderful to see you, and I'm so very pleased that you've invited me, and I'm excited about our next 28 minutes, I guess. So yes. You lead, and I will follow.
So I kind of want to just tell some people, because we have some new viewers who haven't heard our previous interviews, and everybody knows Orlando Magic. Everybody knows Pat Williams. Whether you are a sports fanatic or a mere fan or just somebody who, knows a little buzzwords about sports like me. But one thing I've known, and Pat and I, like I said, we've been friends. I said we're friends, Pat, for years. We've been friends for years. And so he not only has, he's the co-founder of Orlando Magic. He has done some things. And then you were in Major League Baseball before, right? So what you're doing now is not new, right, Pat?
Well, Loretta, my roots are in baseball. I played all the sports in high school growing up in Wilmington, Delaware. And then I went to Wake Forest University and I played ball there. I was a catcher. And then in June of 1962, my professional career began. I was a minor league catcher in the Philadelphia Phillies farm system for 2 seasons, 62 and 63. And then they swung me over into the front office. And that's where my career began in Miami in 1964. And then I moved to the Phillies Club in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and served as the general manager there for 4 seasons. And then at the age of 28, seemingly out of nowhere, but I know now it was part of God's plan for my life, I switched sports and had the opportunity to go to the 76ers and then to the Chicago Bulls and then to the Atlanta Hawks. And then back to Philadelphia for 12 years. And 35 years ago this summer, we moved here to Orlando to take on the task of trying to bring an expansion basketball team here to Central Florida. We were successful in that endeavor. And the Magic have now played in the NBA for over 30 years, including that period when Penny Hardaway was here with Shaquille O'Neal. And we were quite the young team. So we got to know Penny very well and think so highly of him. And we're very pleased that he's found a really solid coaching niche in his hometown. So that's a brief background. And my big endeavor now, Loretta, is trying to bring Major League Baseball to Orlando. We're doing our very best to sell Major League Baseball, that they need to put a franchise here in Central Florida.
Yes.
This is about the fastest growing area in America, and there's no end in sight. And so we really think that this can be a good baseball city. So that's a brief overview. In addition to that, I continue to write. This most recent book is, it's my 117th book. It's hard for me to believe. And it's called Revolutionary Leadership. And we're going to have a good time tonight talking about it, Loretta.
Yes, we are. And I wanted to just do some of what your publicist sent me, just so America knows and they won't forget. So you're one of America's top motivational and inspirational speakers. And as we get into this conversation, they'll find out why. So you've written a timely new book offering insights from the American Revolution for any reader seeking wisdom for leadership. What better model could readers have for courage and creativity in times of crisis and change than those who find themselves in positions of leadership during an American Revolution. And every time I get your book, they're on my bookshelves, but we're packing because we're going to be moving into another home soon. So I packed up a lot of my books, but I have about 4 of your books. So I want to just dive right into this because I know this book is so timely that it's almost scary. It's like you foretold the future because you started writing this book and collecting data. And so there's one thing you guys have to know. Pat doesn't just write a book. He goes and visits the places. He researches the people that he is talking about extensively, better than probably any reporter or anchor or TV host that I know. Pat dives deep into it. So when he's writing, he knows exactly what he's talking about. So tell me, what really was the driving force for you to go ahead and pen Revolutionary Leadership?
Loretta, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. My dad was a high school history teacher, and that was the environment in which I grew up. It was where American history was alive. It was discussed. My mother, a real American patriot, and I grew up near Philadelphia, and my mother would always take me up to visit Independence Hall. And visit the different sites of the Revolution and spend time touring through Valley Forge. And so I always had that interest there. But then later in life, I really became fascinated with the topic of leadership and what it takes to be a great leader. And so we decided to let's take these key leaders, men and women, young and old, through the revolutionary period, and what was it about them that allowed them to be so successful as leaders through very tough times? And how did this country even come about? How did it come into being? So that was the mission, and we spent numbers of years examining. We came up with 25 men and women to look at. I probably could have had some more, but we felt those were the key. Some of them very well known, some not known at all, and some not so well known. And at the end of each chapter, we list the leadership lessons that we can take from each one of these people and apply to our own life. So that's a brief rundown about how this book came about.
Okay, so and that's beautiful. So I put the title of the book on the screen, and we'll keep it up there periodically throughout this interview. So what I love that you do when you do the chapters, and after you read the entire book, it's so easy to go back and find, well, I wanted to read more about what he said about this or what he said about that. So I just want you to let's see what the first and your another thing I love and enjoy reading about your books, Pat, are these endorsements. These people really summarize what you're saying. I thought that nobody could write better than you, and they cannot, but they are on the same par as describing your book as you are as writing the book. So I always love to see who Pat has today, who has endorsed him. And he is the creme de la creme.
Loretta, I was very pleased. Brian Kilmeade of Fox and Friends did a blurb. Nick Saban, the football coach. Mike Huckabee, a former governor of Arkansas, Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, Adam Silver, who is the commissioner of the NBA, and others. And so it's always uplifting when people like that take the time to do a little blurb to endorse your book. So that was very kind of them, and I'm obviously very grateful.
So how do you choose the leaders that you're going to spotlight and highlight as you create this web of leadership skills and qualities and character and courage? How do you choose who's going to represent which one that you talk about in your books?
Loretta, let me say first of all that our country is an absolute miracle. There is no way, no reason that the United States of America should ever have come into existence, but it was a God thing. Here was the situation. For 150 years, the colonies had been subservient to Great Britain. England was the most dominant nation on earth. They had the strongest military. They had countries all over around the world that they ruled over, and the American colonies were one of them. But they began to get a little bit greedy, and they began to start taxing heavily these colonies, and they continued to do that on different items, and the colonists were very much opposed. No taxation without representation. They had no voice. Mm-hmm. And of course came the famous Boston Tea Party. Tea was a big commodity then. And so these three ships arrive at the Boston Harbor, Griffin's Wharf, and 100 men slip on at night, slip in there. They got axes, and they had 340 chests of tea. And they cracked open those cases and dumped it all in the Boston Harbor. Well, that inflamed Great Britain mightily, and they started sending troops over. And eventually that's how the war got started. And it continued for 8 years, a war that we had no business winning. The British had better everything, more troops. They had a navy. We didn't have a navy.
Yeah.
They had weapons. They had ordnance. They had clothing. They had food. They had everything. And we didn't have much of anything except one thing. We had the better leaders.
Leadership.
It came down to leadership. And of course, George Washington was the prime leader through that war. And we do a chapter on him. But there were many, many others. Thomas Jefferson is featured. John Adams, Samuel Adams. And then we get in to some of these really interesting generals and soldiers. General Knox and Nathaniel Greene and Lafayette, who came over from France. His story is fascinating. Mm-hmm. Baron von Steuben, a Prussian who came over and taught our men at Valley Forge how to march and how to handle a weapon and how to move as a unit. These were just farmers, basically, who had come together, and they didn't know much about soldiering. So Baron von Steuben played a key role. And on it goes like that, Loretta. And it's a fascinating story of how our country came into being. And I'm convinced that all Americans really need to take the time and learn about the founding of this country. They didn't need to know who these people are.
I totally agree with you on that. So what's your, because I've said before in your books, I love how you're always weaving these stories. So what would be one of your favorite stories in this book? And I know it's difficult because you love all of them. It's like somebody who loves their characters in their movies or stories. They're like, well, I can't pick a favorite. So I'm going to ask you, out of the 25.
Okay.
What's your favorite story?
Loretta, let's take a minute to talk about Lafayette. Now, Lafayette was from France. He was young. He was 19 years old. And he heard about this revolution that was taking place here across the ocean. So he gets on a boat by himself, comes across, didn't know anybody, gets off at a wharf in South Carolina, wends his way north, and somehow comes into the presence of George Washington. Now, Washington had been getting letters from Benjamin Franklin saying, I'm sending more Frenchmen over. And Washington wrote him back and said, no more Frenchmen. They're too entitled, no more. But for some reason, he embraced this kid, Napoleon, or Lafayette, excuse me. He embraced this young Lafayette and put him to work in the military. And he ended up in combat. He was wounded at the Battle of Brandywine. He was there heading up a unit at the final Battle of Yorktown. I mean, he played a significant role. Now, the war ends. He goes back to France, where that revolution was taking place. He almost lost his life there. But later in life, he comes back to, I guess, do a victory tour through different cities and states. And boy, he was just received, like an all-time hero. Just the country, wherever he stopped, they just embraced him. So, Loretta, when you hear today of Lafayette, Louisiana, you hear of Lafayette, Indiana.
Yeah.
And you hear of Fayetteville, Arkansas, and you hear of Fayetteville, North Carolina. And you might read about Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. Well, that's this 19-year-old youngster who came across towards the start of the war and became embedded with Washington and was a key part in our winning the war. Lafayette, quite a story.
Yeah, that's like number 20 out of the 25 that you have in here. So you address this in this book too, and I was trying to find it, and you address it in your other books too, and as part of your motivational, inspirational talks too. Can you remind us some of the top characteristics that a strong leader has? Because most people think leaders are fearless, that they're never afraid. But I know, because I've done a lot of research and I've read a lot of your books and I've read this one, that's not it. You're afraid and you have fear, but you do it anyway. So tell us the qualities, how you can recognize a strong leader.
Well, the first thing that I've noticed with all of these men and all great leaders, they are visionaries. They see the future before it gets here. In their minds, down the road, they see a finished product. And then they work backwards, putting the pieces in place to turn that vision into reality. So let's take George Washington. In his mind, during those 8 tough years of the war, he saw a new nation. Clearly in his mind, it was a vision. He had a new nation, independent of Great Britain's rule. And I think that's what kept him going through those eight difficult, tough years of the Revolutionary War. So I think that's the first thing that I've learned about leadership. The best leaders are visionaries. And then secondly, these leaders have the ability to communicate that vision successfully. And they all seem to do it in the same way. Let me summarize. Be clear, be concise, be correct, be consistent, and be courageous. There are times a leader has to step up and speak with great courage. So those are 2 things that I have noticed about all the best leaders. And I would add one other here for us, Loretta, and it's simply called people skills. The very best leaders care about people, not just what people can do for you, but they truly care about people, and they're interested in other people, and they have a heart for people, and they have empathy for people. They really deep down love people. And so I think that's a characteristic that I've noticed with so many leaders that I've studied over the years. They truly want to be a difference maker in the lives of people. So those are 3 thoughts on leadership that I can share with us today.
I love that. I love that so much. So what are some, you have quotes too that you use, like one of them is leaders are made, not born, and can come from the unlikeliest places. Tell me about that. Because most people think, I started with nothing. I have nothing. And like in the Bible, he was like, I'm the least of the least of the least in the family, right? In this village that he was in. So tell us how we can encourage somebody who thinks that because of where they came from or where they're currently living, that they lack leadership skills.
Loretta, that's a fallacy because no matter where you are in life, you are a leader. In other words, if you are a husband, you're a leader. If you're a wife, well, you're a leader. If you have children, well, you're leaders. If you're grandparents, you're leaders. You may be leading in youth sports. You may be leading in your company. You may be leading in some area of your church. But if you do nothing else, you've got to lead yourself. So we're all leaders and we're all different. You don't have to be charismatic. Right. You don't have to be strikingly handsome. You don't have to be, an absolute superstar. Not at all. Wherever you are, you can start this whole area of leading. And I often try to summarize leadership this way, Loretta. 7 things one must do to be a leader, right and true. Have vision that is strong and clear. communicate so they can hear, have people skills based in love, and character that's far above, the competence to solve and teach, and boldness that has fearless reach, a serving heart that stands close by to help, assist, and edify. So I think that's a summation of, the 7 qualities that I've learned that great leaders possess. And we can all strive for that.
Yes.
It doesn't matter, if you're famous or not famous, those 7 sides of leadership, we can all practice them on a daily basis and become very effective in this area of leadership. And
I agree. Because having those qualities, Pat, wouldn't you agree that that's what makes you shine and what makes you a star to somebody and even to yourself, even if nobody agrees, if you have that list of 7. And I love how you wrapped it up in a beautiful present and put a bow on it. So it's easy to remember. And I was like, I'm trying to take notes, but I'm also don't want to look like I'm taking notes because I'm supposed to, as a host, look like I'm paying attention. But I'm going to replay this and write that down, and I'll have to use it and, of course, give you credit for it. So I just want everybody to know you are a leader, like Pat said. No matter you lead yourself every day. You're making decisions on what are you going to do, what are you going to wear, what are you going to say, how fast you're going to drive, what are you going to buy at the grocery store. And we have to look at those key questions in our lives and say. And some of us are on autopilot. I want people to stop being on autopilot and just live and take note of what you're saying and why you're saying it and what's the basis of it, because a lot of it is just not true. It's myth. And we keep on quoting it, thinking it's true. And one thing you said you do in your book, and they do the same thing in the Bible. And Pat, I know you don't care about the color of a person's skin. It's their character that's deep for you. But sometimes it's crucial to let somebody know that in the space of time that an African American did something, like in the Bible, a Samaritan or a Jewish person or a Gentile. And you say that because you're making you got to say it to prove a point that these people weren't the majority at all, but what they were contributing was so significant. It needed to be told that they weren't, the norm. So I love how you do that, and you let us know who that person is, so if they're going to do their own research, they'll know. And it helps everybody because all of us make American history, not just Europeans or whatever. So I love how you talk about that in your book, and not just this book. You've been doing it before people knew it was a thing. Diversity, inclusion, and equity. You've always been that person, Pat, and I kudos to you.
Well, Loretta, I really feel very strongly that it's important that all of us as Americans know about our country and how this country came about, and the problems that we've had. Oh yes, the triumphs we've had. Oh yes, it's important to have a good grasp of the background of this nation and how we came into being and how we got to where we are today. And these people, we feel these 25 people, and I've mentioned their names. We've had a good look at, and some came from Europe, as I mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then Loretta, there was Henry Knox, and boy, I enjoyed studying the life of Henry Knox. Here it is in a nutshell: big, hefty guy, huge. 21 years old. He's running a bookstore in Boston. He was a bookseller. But the war begins, and he goes to Washington and volunteers his services, and Washington is impressed with the young man. And Henry Knox comes up with this idea. The British are there in Boston, and Washington has just arrived, and he's got his little army. And up in Fort Ticonderoga, up in northern New York, the word is that there's this enormous amount of weaponry and ammunition, that's up there at Fort Ticonderoga. And Henry Knox says, let me go up and get it and bring it down here. Well, the problem is it's wintertime. And somehow Henry Knox, with horses and oxen and sleds and volunteers, he goes up there, gets it all loaded up. And now he's got to get it down through the winter and across frozen lakes. And over weeks and weeks, he finally arrives in Boston and has all this weaponry that Washington is thrilled about. sets it up overlooking down into Boston. The British see it and say, "Uh-oh, this doesn't look good," and they leave Boston. There was no fighting in Boston. They just saw that and left. Henry Knox's efforts really is what spared the destruction of Boston. Now, at that point, the British decide to go to New York, and that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But Henry Knox, and then later Henry Knox was there throughout the war, and when Washington first became president, Henry Knox was in his first cabinet, Secretary of War. Henry Knox, this 21-year-old kid who'd been a bookseller. So the book is just filled with these amazing little tales of these men and women who just seemingly came together at the right time and formed this excellent leadership team that allowed us, and Great Britain had everything else, but they didn't have the leaders that we did.
I absolutely love that. And you're going to have to come on for like a part 2, because leadership is so critical to not only our country, but in our families and in our own communities, on our jobs and everything like that. And I want people to own that, to know how important that we all contribute. And you gave them the 7 characteristics of a great leader. And you talked about, visionary and how they see the end results and they work towards that, and being able to communicate with everybody, not just people that look like us, sound like us, or that we're over, or just in our family, because we all can add value to this country. And the shape we're in now, it's going to take all of us powering up, using our superpower, whatever that may be, to really turn this thing around. Who wants it to go back? We want to go forward.
Loretta,
did you want to say something?
We all need to be part of this. Extreme dreams depend on teams.
Ooh.
And we need, we have big dreams, I believe.
Ooh, I love that.
But you can't do it alone. And we've got to hook up. We've got to join arms together and proceed as teammates. Whether it's a sports team or a community team, a church team, it doesn't matter. A family team, you just can't do it alone. There are no lone rangers out there who are really effective, and so putting a great team together with this nation, and we can do it across racial lines, across religious lines, across wealth lines. We all have to hook up and start pulling together.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I got it right. Extreme dreams deserve a great team.
Well, extreme dreams depend.
That's even better. I love that. Depend on great teams.
Dreams depend on teams.
Extreme dreams depend on
teams. There you go.
I love that. I love that.
So hopefully that's a value. So
that is extreme value.
And now, Loretta, let me just say one other thing. We do write about some women who are key people here, but there are 2 women in particular that I do want to just mention. One was George Washington's wife, Martha. They had a wonderful marriage. During the 8 years of the Revolutionary War period, in the wintertime, Martha would come and join the general, and was there throughout those tough, cold winters, leading the sock knitting brigade to help these young soldiers somehow get through these awful winters. Martha was a big part of it. And the other woman was John Adams' wife, Abigail. They had a unique marriage. And the good news is that all their correspondence, and that's how they corresponded in those days, through letters. John and Abigail saved their letters, and historians are so grateful for that. It's because so much of that period comes from the writing back and forth between John and Abigail Adams. On the other hand, Martha Washington destroyed all the correspondence with her husband. She didn't, after the war, she didn't feel that was anybody's business. And all that letters were destroyed, except maybe a couple. And to this day, historians are grieving, because what would that have meant, in the study of American history? But for whatever reason, Martha Washington decided that was nobody's business. But nevertheless, we still know a remarkable amount about George Washington and others. But thanks to Abigail Adams and John Adams, they saved all that mail, and that's why we get so much about early history from the two of them.
Absolutely. I told you when I'm talking to you, I almost forget to say something because I'm so fascinated and I'm learning so much about every, history and leadership and inspiration. And you drop these nuggets like that extreme dream depends on teams. And you do it all the time. That is not a first for him on my show, guys. We got to have more time with Pat Williams because we all will walk away better and stronger and more informed and deeply moved by his words. And I know I only have I've passed my time, but I want to cheer you on about that Major League Baseball team in South Florida. And when you get it, and I know you will, can you let me throw the ball? I'll have to practice to make it reach from the pitcher's mound to the bat. But I know I choke you up, don't I, Pat? I just choke you up. With special one to do that.
You come on down here, Loretta, and we'll take good care of you when we get our team. And we are, this state is fascinating. There are three major parts. North Florida, of course, is the Panhandle, over across from Pensacola and Tallahassee, and then over to Jacksonville. Then you come down, and when you get to Daytona, you're now in Central Florida. And that's where the I-4 corridor comes in, which goes from Daytona through Orlando over to Tampa. And then as you head south, along about Vero Beach, on down to Fort Lauderdale, down to Miami. Now you're in South Florida. So Florida is a huge, huge state. But these are the three major areas: North, Central, and South Florida. So there's a little geography discussion for us.
I told you, I always walk away so much smarter when I have time with Pat Williams. I'm just informed. I'm almost dangerous because I'm just so knowledge filled now. So when you come back, and we have a lot of things going on, and of course it's going to bring us to South Florida. And I'm going to call your team and let them know that I will be in South Florida so I can meet you finally in person, you and your beautiful bride. So we're going to make that happen. And I need you to come to Memphis.
I'll look forward to that. And I love Memphis. There's so much to see in Memphis. I've been there numbers of times. I've toured Elvis's house. I have been there, the Civil Rights Museum, the motel, and the site across from the motel. I mean, you talk about living history.
Yeah.
And every time I come, my heart bleeds. It's just an amazing experience. So much to do in Memphis. And you can see a Memphis Grizzlies game, and they got AAA baseball there, and they've got Beale Street and the wonderful ribs and music, and they just don't have the Ducks anymore.
Yeah, we have the Ducks. They're back at the Peabody, and plus your favorite talk show host is here. Remember?
Oh,
I'm your favorite. Yeah, the Ducks are back at the Peabody.
Love Memphis.
Yeah.
And Loretta, I just love being on with you. I'm always available. You holler at me, and we do well together. We're a good team.
We are. And so on my network, there's a sports channel. And I know you were doing sports with Fox and some other sports radio. So I need you to come do some sports with me, too, on my network, on the sports channel. How about that?
Anytime, Loretta. You wear many hats, many
Well,
hats.
it's all a part of media. So I'm just touching on things that I hadn't touched on with just the show. I couldn't be all over the place with it, but with the network, I can have different channels. And, like a Fox News, they got, like your friend, Brian, he's on Fox and Friends. And then there's political, and then there's travel and daily news. So, yeah, that's how you do it. Well, I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to be my guest, and we're in person as opposed to being on Blog Talk and podcasting. So it means a lot, Pat Williams. Thank you so much.
Loretta, thanks a million. Wonderful to see you, and all the continued very best to you.
All right, I'm going to close out. I need you to just stay right there for me, and it won't take long. I always close with saying, think positive, everybody. Dream amazing big dreams. help someone along the way. And we'll see you very, very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.